Hi again, Devin here, creator of the Naval Battles customizable card game. Welcome to part 3 of my video tutorial series on playing the game. So I'm going to start by explaining the golden rules. Now in part 1 I said that there were 4 golden rules. There are actually 5, and they're fairly simple to understand. We're going to get into these golden rules right now. Now this is from chapter 2 of the Admiral's Handbook. Golden rule number 1 is one that pretty well many games have, with mechanics similar to this one: Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Force of Will, that sort of thing. So golden rule number 1 states that if a card's text tells you to do something or has any effect that contradicts the rules in this game, the card takes precedence. So for example, if something says that you're to draw extra cards, you draw extra cards. So next thing is the legendary rule. Now, as I explained in chapter 2, there are legendary permanents, legendary ships, and legendary resources. So the legendary rule states that if any legendary permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if you control a legendary permanent with the same name, you must sacrifice one. So basically meaning that you can't control more than one legendary permanent with the same name. If a card's text specifies that it counts as another legendary permanent by name, then it is as if it is that card as well. If that card had that name instead of its actual name, with regards to legendary rule, that counts as legendary for that permanent. Parenthesized names, however, do not count towards legendary rule. Now, there are no parenthesized names in any cards yet, but in the future there could be some cards created that have the same names as other cards, but will have parenthesized names, so those will not count towards legendary. So in regards to legendary rule, it's like you would drop off the parenthesized name. Next is the worldly resource rule. Again, from chapter 2, I explained that there were resources that were considered worldly, that were actual places in the world. So the worldly rule states if a player attempts to play a worldly resource card with another one of the same name in the battlefield under any player's control, the newest version is bounced back to its owner's hand. So the existing one must be removed from the battlefield before the new one can be played. Next is with regards to drawing cards. Like many games, players draw a card at the beginning of their turn during their beginning phase. That player may choose to draw from their main library or their resource library, and I'll get more into that when I get into structure of the game. There are other cards and effects in the game that allow you to draw additional cards. If at any time you are forced to draw a card and there are no cards in your main library, you must forfeit the game. So players must be mindful as to how many cards are in their main library. And now the minimum deck size for your main deck is 40 cards. We'll get more into that later. And lastly, the golden rules is about the resource pool. If players tap resources for requisition, that requisition will enter a pool. Players will be able to keep that requisition in their pool for as long as they're in their main phase of their turn, or until that requisition is spent. If that player has their requisition left over in their pool at the end of their main phase, the pool will empty. Players will start and end their turns with no requisition in their pool. And if a player taps requisition during another player's turn and has left over, that requisition will immediately empty from their pool the next time a player will have priority. We'll get into a little bit about priority when we talk about the effect chain and how all of that works. Alright, so now we'll get into constructed format. We'll be calling it standard from here on in. When we start league play, everything will be considered standard, and any expansion sets that are released in the future, whether they be cube expansions or game format supplements, will all be legal to be used in constructed standard format decks. So constructed decks must consist of a minimum of 40 cards. And this is what the cards will look like sleeved. So your main deck can only contain cards that are anything but resources. So as you see here, these cards are all non-resource cards here. So then your resource deck contains only resource cards and must be between 15 and 25 cards. And typically, players will use basic resource cards like these here in their resource deck if they need to supplement their resources. However, players are free to replace those with non-basic resources of any types because they all produce requisition. As you can tell, the requisition icon is on all of these here and also on the basic resources in here. So then we shuffle these cards up. Each deck gets shuffled. Then we present them both to our opponents and they cut the decks. And then you set your starting life at 20 hit points and determine who gets to go first by some random means. Players will then draw a hand of 7 cards off of their main library. Now, at the beginning of the game, the player has the option to take a mulligan. And now a mulligan would be if you're not satisfied with some cards in your hand and you feel that you need something different to start your hand. What you'll do is you'll choose cards out of your hand that you want to put back. And you will put them on the bottom of your library in any order. So say for example I can take these two and this. So any number of cards from your hand. You take them and put them on the bottom of your library and you draw that many cards. 1, 2, 3 in this case. Players who wish to take subsequent mulligans will do the same thing, except they will draw one less card each time they choose to mulligan, thus reducing their starting hand size. Maximum hand size is also 7, so just to keep that in mind. So then when starting the game, there's a basic turn structure that players can follow, and there's only 3 phases in the game. There's the beginning phase, there's the main phase, and then there's the end phase. So the beginning phase consists of the ready step, which you untap all your stuff that's been tapped from the previous turn. Then your draw step. You have to choose whether you want to draw from your main library or your resource library. Main library draws go right to your hand. Resource draws go directly into the battlefield unless it's a legendary or worldly resource with a legal copy in the battlefield, and then it goes to your hand instead. Then after your draw step is the upkeep step. During your upkeep step is when all damage is removed from ships and gives you the option to repair other ships that are crippled or otherwise can't repair themselves. Now, aircraft carriers and subs can't repair themselves because they don't have mass damage crews. So you have to tap 1 requisition to repair up to 2 points of damage, and you can do this as many times as you like through your upkeep step. And if your ship is crippled, any ship that's crippled, you must pay 1 requisition during your upkeep in order to remove the cripple counter. Also during your upkeep step, you can replace pre-equipped aircraft that have been downed in combat. You pay 2 requisition for each pre-equipped aircraft. The next is your main phase. Main phase items that you can do is you can tap requisition for construction, commission and deploy units that have enough requisition counters on them, play a resource card if you haven't put one into the battlefield this turn, and go to combat. And then the end phase is just end of turn effects end here, and then you discard down to 7 cards if you're over 7 in your hand. Alright, so when you start the game, you want to have your two decks separated. You can put your main deck on the right side and your resource deck on the left side. And you put all your resources that you draw in the middle. So when you start the game, you have no resources. So you want to draw a resource at the beginning of the game. So in this case, we got a worldly resource. So it goes directly into the battlefield because there isn't a legal copy in the battlefield right now. So then what we want to do is we want to start deploying units. So regardless of which unit we have here, right now we only have 3, otherwise the rest of these are instants. And to play an instant, you have to be able to pay its cost outright. So I don't have enough requisition for them, but what I can do is I can start building this ship, the USS Yorktown. So what I would do is I would tap a Esquimalt, in this case, for requisition, and then you put it face down in the construction zone, which is usually off to the side from the battlefield, and then you have to use something to keep track of how much requisition is on that. So we like to use like spin down dice. You can use the spin down dice from any popular card game that they come with. So in this case it's a 1, so I'm going to put 1 on there, and then that's my turn. So then the next turn, when I go to play, beginning of the turn, I can again choose main deck or resource deck. I still want resources, so next I drew a basic resource, and it goes directly into the battlefield. And you can continue tapping resources, putting requisition counters on construction items, put new items into construction as well. So say for example right now I want to start getting this out. So I can do the same thing, put it face down off to the side and tap the 2 that I have here and make that a 2. And the game can progress in this fashion. Okay, so we'll say the game has progressed down a little ways and we have 7 requisition counters on this unit. And recall that this unit here was the USS Yorktown. This one is worth 10 requisition to complete construction. So right now I have 5 resource cards in the battlefield. What I can do is I can tap 3 more to bring this up to 10. It gives me the opportunity to deploy the Yorktown. So in this case, because it's a ship, it goes directly into the battlefield. And it can be used to attack and defend, plus it also has a fast effect. You can fire harpoons at a surface ship. Okay, but we also have one other item here. Remember, this was our Phalanx 1B. That one costs 4. So we'll tap 2 more here, and we can deploy our Phalanx. But now we get the opportunity to choose, because our flagship can take up to 8 weapons upgrades. And the Yorktown, well, it has 2 weapons pylons. So I could equip this to the Yorktown, or I could equip it to my flagship. If you equip it to your fleet ships, you can just slide the card underneath like that. And that shows that it's been equipped to that ship. If you equip it to your flagship, you just designate a special area for your weapons upgrade slots. And now this is equipped to my flagship instead. So to go into more detail with regards to legendary aircraft carriers that come pre-equipped with aircraft, like the USS Enterprise here, you would build and deploy the ship the same way as you normally would, by putting it in the construction zone and putting requisition on it. And as soon as you have enough requisition, you deploy it to the battlefield. The only difference is in this case, with these types of ships, legendary aircraft carriers, they enter the battlefield with the aircraft pre-equipped to them. So then what we can do is we put out tokens of those aircraft, our token cards. So the Enterprise enters the battlefield with an FA-18 squadron and an F-14 squadron. So we can literally take those cards, or whatever you like to use for tokens. It is recommended to buy the mini token cards because they make things so much easier. Mines, upgrades, those sorts of things. And different types of aircraft as well that come pre-equipped on carriers. So and then these cards can be treated just the same way as any aircraft card. And you can attack and defend with these aircraft as well. Just by... and you can indicate that they're tapped or not. Now, then the other thing you can do is the Enterprise has 2 open aircraft slots. So I have an aircraft card in my hand now, the FA-18E Super Hornet. Aircraft get built the same way as weapons and ships, and they get deployed to aircraft carriers. So I have the Enterprise here, once again. Now I can put this on here because the Enterprise has 2 slots, as you can see there. So I would just put this either beside or underneath or somewhere close, just to indicate that these are together. So then the last major card type that uses the construction zone for deployment are defense cards. Now defense cards can only be equipped to your flagship, and you can only have one of each of the types equipped. Let's say for example I have Sonar Mark III here, so I could build this and I could deploy it to my flagship and I have a sonar. But I also have Aegis Combat System. Now Aegis Combat System is an integrated combat system that you deploy as a defense card, and it has radar and sonar. So in the case of this, if I had Aegis Combat System deployed, I could not deploy another sonar. It doesn't work because you already have a sonar equipped with the Aegis Combat System. So it would be just like the weapon that we've equipped to our flagship. We just put the card down in a designated slot that we set as our weapons pylons for our flagship. And remember, you can only have 8 things equipped to your flagship. So that concludes part 3 of the Naval Battles customizable card game tutorial on playing the game and game structure. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in part 4 when I talk about effects and the effect chain and how that works. Thanks.